Is Denver real estate overvalued? It's a question we get a lot, and there's a new report that recently came out that goes a long way towards answering this question and showing how overvalued Denver real estate might be, at least in comparison to other US cities. We're going to go through that in this video and explain what it means. Okay, so first of all, you hear this all the time. Real estate's overvalued. There's a bubble, right? People use these words all the time, whether or not they're actually accurate. Prices went up a ton during COVID because money was free and people's living situations changed enough that made them want to move. So consumers had a ton of buying power and there was a lot of demand that drove prices up. Now interest rates have shot up, and because of that and some other factors, demand has stayed low. So real estate prices have kind of stayed right where they were near the height. They're not at the height of where they were in really June of 2022. That was kind of the top, but they stuck right around there and they haven't come down as much as some people would have liked, or at least enough to make buying the home you want an affordable thing for the average consumer. In many situations, buying a house is very unaffordable right now, keeping in line with buying a lot of things. It's actually, based on one report I read, the most unaffordable time to exist in America in history right now. Okay, but are housing prices overvalued? What does this mean, overvalued? Well, typically when I hear it, I say, well, the market dictates what prices are, right? The government doesn't set them. People don't even set them. The market sets them, and people are part of the market, obviously. But if you list a home too high and someone's not willing to pay for that home, they won't buy it at that price. They may buy it at a lower price. But it's not like someone can just set a home price and have that be overvalued. They can, but it's not going to sell. So my response typically goes something like, well, if the market is supporting these prices are not overvalued. The market is always going to properly value any price for a good service, home, whatever, at least so long as we can agree upon what value means. And usually when we talk about it, we mean market value. So looking at it that way, nothing can really ever be overvalued as long as those prices are being had on the open market. But on the other hand, say in, 2008, the market was supporting a certain home price for a long time until it wasn't. And then fairly quickly, it did not support that price or any price close to it for a while. And I think we can all agree that looking at that 2008 example, before the crash, those home prices were overvalued. That's kind of the whole point. So where does that leave us? An actual economist could probably come in and just tear to shreds everything I just said, and quite possibly will in the comments. But let's turn to a local Denver Business Journal article that asks this very question. Is the Denver housing market overvalued? So they quote a recent study from First American Financial Corp, which says, in a nutshell, yeah. And not just in Denver. They're saying housing is overvalued in at least half of America's major cities. But how are they determining this? What is the metric they're using to determine whether something's overvalued or not? Well, basically all they're doing is comparing buying power to the median home price. So take the average buying power of a resident in said city, how much money they make and how much money they have, how much can they afford based on their salary, assets, other things, versus the median sale price for a home in that metro area. If buying power is lower than the sale price, this study is saying that that housing market is overvalued. And out of 50 major US cities that the report looked at, they found Denver was the 17th worst. So the 17th biggest spread between buying power and median home price. And in the article's preamble, they talk about, home prices have risen steadily over the last 10 years, especially during the pandemic, and that has created a significant affordability crisis in many regions. And they say high interest rates and a sustained lack of inventory certainly aren't helping matters. Well, that's actually a bit of an understatement. I wouldn't say it's not just they're not helping matters. High interest rates and low inventory are the entire cause of the affordability issue. The simple fact of rates going from 3% to 7% is costing people thousands more in monthly payments on their mortgage. A house that may have cost you $2,500 a month during the pandemic now is probably going to be around $4,000 a month without any real change in home price. That's just an example. It can vary based on a number of factors. And in some cases, home prices have actually gone up quite a bit. We've seen that in Denver too, at least from a certain time in the pandemic. They're higher now than they were then. Like I said, they kind of peaked in mid 2022, but say, early 2021, even when there were bidding wars, home prices are higher now. And that second part of the equation, the sustained inventory shortage, that's the big reason for that. You got a few things going on here. Number one, inventory has been an issue for a long time. Well before the pandemic, cities like Denver, including Denver, but many others, were having inventory issues. Population growth was going faster than growth in housing. That creates an imbalance. Builders were trying to keep up back then. Well, then COVID happened. Let's remember what happened to builders and many industries then. They stopped production for a while. They got backlogged, and then when it was time to build again, well, remember there were these supply chain issues that made it really hard for them to ramp up production to where they needed to be. They're still trying to catch up, and it's going to take a long time to do so. And it's even more complicated than that because home builders only build at scale in certain areas in the Denver metro. You're not going to solve an inventory issue in Denver neighborhoods like Park Hill, Highlands, Wash Park by building your way out of it. There's nowhere to build. But even beyond that, we're dealing with this thing called the rate lock-in effect. And that's what's causing fewer homes to come on the market for sale than otherwise would. So you have sellers who locked into an interest rate 2.5%, 3%, or even if it wasn't one of those really cherry prime interest rates, even if it was 4.5%, well, you compare that to 7.5% now, that is a big difference like we discussed before. So if said seller doesn't absolutely need to move for some major life reason, they're probably not going to move. Why would you give up 3.5% to double it to 7%? This is causing many would-be sellers to stay put and for inventory to stay low, which keeps prices high, which makes affordability issues in many metro areas, and in Denver makes apparently the 17th worst issue in America. Okay, so here's this graph that talks about the areas with the biggest difference in buying power. And what you're going to notice right away is, yeah, Denver's 17th worst, but it's nowhere near some of the cities on the top. You see the ones on the top: LA, San Diego, San Francisco, New York. The spreads here between buying power and median home price are huge. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, $500,000, over $700,000 in the case of San Jose, California. LA is deemed the most unaffordable area because the difference there in buying power and median home price is more than double what buying power is. So you can see it there. Buying power, $413,000. Existing home price, median is $923,000. That's a spread of $510,000. A bigger gap between buying power and home price than the average buying power itself. Or as they say, it's 124% difference. And you go down the list, it doesn't get a lot better. San Jose, 98%. San Diego, 80%. Seattle, 44%. New York, 35%. Las Vegas, 30% difference. Once you get down to Denver at number 17, it gets a lot different. Yes, it's still unaffordable and overvalued, if you will, because there is an inversion between buying power and average home price. Median home price for you sticklers. But the difference in Denver is 9%. So average buying power, $503,000. Median home price, $550,000. At least based on one measure of median home price in the Denver metro that this study used. That's a difference of roughly $47,000 or 9%. For Denver to be number 17, that puts it right below Tampa, Florida in unaffordability and right above Portland, Oregon. And interestingly, Austin, Texas. Austin was one of those boom towns during COVID that just went absolutely to the moon. Denver went up, but Austin went way, way up. And it's come back down quite a bit too, which is why we're not seeing it up there at the top of the graph with those big blue bars. So we do have an affordability crisis in housing prices nationally, and Denver is certainly involved, if not one of the absolute worst offenders. But at least locally, and I hesitate to say this because it's a big statement, but things are starting to look like they may be getting better. Interest rates still suck. Nobody's getting a break on those at all. The Fed told us we were going to have 4 rate cuts this year, and here in mid-June when I'm recording this, we're still waiting on the first one. They've walked it back. There may be 1 rate cut this year. There may be none. Interest rates are going to stay high for the foreseeable future. That's just the reality of the situation. But at least in Denver, we are seeing inventory creep up, meaning that will affect the supply-demand curve. And while it's a seasonal reality that inventory always goes up after the spring, even adjusted for season, we're seeing more inventory come on the market. More inventory means more choices, more supply, hopefully better home prices at some point in the future. Right now, I just have Megan Aller's graph pulled up on the screen. If you've watched this channel before, you've seen me use her data. And what we're looking at is this blue line. This is the average daily active count. And what you'll see these few humps. Of the black line, that's month supply of inventory, but the blue line is the average daily active count. Let's just look at that to make it easier because there's a lot going on here. You're seeing where we're at right now. The latest data, which is from the last week of May, well, that shot up pretty significantly. And yes, of course, you can see the ebbs and flows of seasonality. It's very easy to see over the last 2.5 years, right? Inventory goes low in the spring, then goes higher in the fall. But look where the blue line is. It's up there around 8,000 total active units. That's higher than any time in the last 4 years. If you look at the bottom left of the graph that records months of supply of inventory, we're currently at 2.2 months of supply. That's up 70% year over year. So even looking at year over year, even looking at the same time of season, we're up significantly over 2023. Looking at price reductions for pending transactions. So for every transaction that went pending in the last month, how many have had a price reduction? Currently, we're at 34%. 34% of total listings that went under contract had at least one price reduction. That's up almost 7% from a year ago. The market is adjusting in some way, shape, or form, and it's not just season. It would be irresponsible to say, well, this is going to cause a major drop in home prices in the Denver metro anytime soon. There's no sign of that happening. Even though inventory is creeping up, it's not shooting up to the level that it's going to require for major price adjustments to come down. So we're in sort of this place of homeostasis where prices year over year might be up a couple points, might be flat in 2024. They're not going to come down a bunch, but they're not going to go up a bunch either because of these factors we're talking about. Buying power and interest rates play a big role in that. Whenever interest rates come down significantly, that's going to change the landscape of things. But even with things staying locked in the way they are, we are seeing a significant uptick in inventory. It may not be big, but it is significant, which may ease affordability just a little bit over the next 12 months. And going into the second half of 2024, if that's when you're watching this, buyers are going to have even more opportunities for seller concessions and price reductions, stuff we've talked about this channel before. If you need to sell your house, don't freak out. It's going to be fine. I mean, looking at this data, the odds are still in your favor, but you need to be realistic about what's going on and you need to have a good plan. More important than ever to stage, market, present your home well, and price it well. By the way, you wondering what's happening with rent prices in the Denver metro right now? That's significant too. Here's a video on that. Take a look if you want. Otherwise, love you.